Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending our session. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. From my right is David Russell, is a KC, and has been in Dubai attending before DIFC since 2012. Dr. Adil Alzarouni is a businessman and has several hats, in fact. He represents various family offices in the UAE and abroad. And Stephen Ranger is a director at Hassan Luta and Associates law firm. Now, before we start, I would like to see how many of you have succession planning in place. Would you please raise your hands and let me see how many of you have secured your future? Thank you. Yeah, I see very few. And this is the topic of our conversation today, is to enhance succession planning and to describe why it is important for every business and family to have planning in place to avoid the inevitable when it happens. And I wouldn't have a better panel than I do have today to talk us through the subject. Gentlemen, may I start, please, with asking you? The most cited statistics is about family future and family erosion of wealth. What do you think, representing your family and other families, how do you see it? What processes can be taken to protect family business, and what are the pitfalls to avoid?
You'll allow me, David and Stephen. I'll just attend to the subject from, first of all, what is the role of family offices in global economy? So globally, depending on the region, you're talking anywhere between 60 to 80% of global economy is actually run by family businesses. So when it comes to GDP contribution, depending on the region, family offices contribute 60 to 80%. A similar number goes when it comes to employment. So the biggest employer of the world are family businesses. So the importance of family businesses to the economies that they serve needs to always be a priority. They are the biggest contributor to GDP and the biggest contributor to employment. Now, when it comes to families and family succession and their success and survival, the stats today say that only 30% succeed to go from generation 1 to generation 2, and only 15% of that succeeds from moving from generation 2 to generation 3. There are many aspects for why does this happen, and I think me and my colleagues could attend to it at the right point in time.
All right. Well, probably since we're talking about this, can you take us through the other statistics as well, which say that between 1 to 5 companies between 1 to 5 years of operation would fail, or a percentage of them, the majority would fail?
Yes. So what people, or many people don't seem to realize that almost statistically, almost 90% of companies fail within the first 3 years. So the norm is failure. Success is the exception. We are, as humans, within our society structure as well as the education system, are not designed to comprehend such a fact. And linking that to family businesses and their success and failure rates, they all link in the ability of family businesses to sustain themselves within the industries they serve in. So their ability to venture into new setups, their ability to survive when it comes to the business side of the equation, needs refreshing, and I think a lot of countries, especially UAE, are trying to eye that and focus on it.
All right, thank you. Maybe we can ask Stephen now, what is the importance of the family business in terms of what characteristics they have in common?
Yeah, well, obviously, family businesses are particularly important, and the success and ongoing nature of family business are particularly important in this region. We'll ask momentarily David Russel KC to make further comment about the importance of it to not only the families themselves but government. We see it as a major key local law firm and representing even private lawyers to rulers. And we see this very regularly, and it's often very sad to see the erosion and the effect on the families. So really everybody in our communities, from Dubai government, local government, DIFC, and particularly now the federal government of the UAE, really paying a great deal of attention to this subject, realising the importance of it, and some very positive steps are occurring. That's a very good thing.
Thank you. And David.
I think one of the things that needs to be taken into account is the distinction between capital markets in this part of the world and capital markets in, say, in Europe or America. Capital markets in Europe and America have huge resources that come from such sources as insurance, particularly life insurance and pension funds. You also have the great public companies. Here, capital markets are very much more limited to sovereign wealth funds, government assets, and private families. So the fact that family succession might be dysfunctional in Europe or America is not going to destroy those economies. If family succession here is dysfunctional, then the price the economy will pay is very high. And you've heard Dr. Adil's figures about the number of family businesses that make it to the third generation. It's a matter of crucial national importance, both here and in the other parts of the Gulf, that until capital markets develop to a greater degree, there are in place procedures which enable families to transition from one generation to the other without being destructive of wealth. Because it's not just the family that loses money, it's the employees, it's the community in terms of the business assets that are not being properly used. So the steps that are being taken include the establishment of pension schemes like the DIFC Employees Welfare Scheme, or DUES. We're seeing that now go on shore, both to the Dubai government and to the private sector. We're seeing initiatives like the new federal family business law, which is to be announced in the next, or the terms of which are to be released in the next few weeks, and things like the announcement by the DIFC of its new Family Business and Global Wealth Centre, all of which are directed as part of a key national strategy to make the UAE in particular one of the great wealth centres of the world.
Thank you. Well, you've mentioned that the government and in fact DIFC plays a role in introducing laws which regulate and recognize the family laws and associated benefits that comes with it. But when we look at the government, what is the government's role in providing a wider regime to organize a society and the country?
Well, I've often been used the analogy that when you look at the legal system of the DIFC, it's a bit like a Swiss cheese. I said that in Geneva once, only to have a Swiss person remind me that Emmental, which is the cheese that actually has the holes in it, is French and not Swiss. But the point is that there are different regimes available, and I think the genius of the Dubai government in the first instance, but it's been repeated in the other emirates, is to realise that there is an enormous strength and benefit from diversity and choice, so that members of the community can select the arrangements that best suit them, so that the facilities that are available in the Abu Dhabi global market, the DIFC, the Ras Al Khaimah International Commercial Centre, are actually available to anybody in the United Arab Emirates who wants to use them. And the important exercise really is to ensure first that there is no doubt of the validity of these structures throughout the whole of the country and indeed throughout the whole of the region, and ensuring the capacity of families to choose what best works for them. I mean, the English concept of the trust, which you will have heard about, actually originated in the Arabic concept of waqf that goes back to the days of the Prophet himself. And these modern tools, well, I shouldn't say modern tools, because in the case of the trust, it's a very old one with its heritage here. The important point is to make knowledge of these tools available so that those families who wish to use them to ensure an orderly transition are available and able to be used at minimal cost through things like the cost of transferring assets and the like. And those issues are going to be addressed in the forthcoming federal family business law.
Thank you. Adil, you've mentioned earlier, you referred to the statistics and that the family business is the backbone of the economy, particularly in Dubai and in the UAE. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the benefits of what benefits they provide the country, and how do we evaluate or assess those benefits?
First of all, let me, I had a session once with the government explaining that it is to the benefit of the government that family money is enlarged and that their role stays crucial in the country. Reason why is that their money is usually emotional money. If all money is logical, it will be invested in the most profiting asset as well as the most profiting country at any point in time. But family businesses, money is a bit emotional because they interact with society, they interact with their context. They have a positioning when it comes to their relationship with the government, their political tie-ups, their social tie-ups, and their family brand. So they tend to be the sticky money that stays in the country the longest. When things happen, and they always happen, when problems happen, economic problems happen, the last money that leaves is family money. When economic crises happen, the last jobs that are lost are family businesses' jobs. They tend to treat them as family, they tend to arrive to an understanding, they tend to want to keep their employees in a steady state. So these characteristics, overall characteristics, should be at the heart of the interest of the government, because then they protect the agility of the economy. The more the family businesses, the more they grow, the more sticky money you would have in an economy. And that is the wish of any economy, any government, to have that kind of resilience, basically.
Yeah, thank you. David, if I can follow up on Adil's explanation now, what elements differentiate the family businesses in the region, in our region?
Well, I think the first point is that they are huge. There are, whilst you know of families like the Ford family or the Rockefeller family in America, they don't have anything like the significance that some of the larger families here do. That's point one, their proportion in the economy and the influence of individual families. The second point, I think, is the one that Dr. Adil has just made, that it is a different type of money. I mean, money that's sitting in hedge funds can vanish overnight if there's a slightly more profitable investment on the other side of the border. Family money doesn't do that, so it helps to build stable societies. And those are key differences, and that's why it's important for the government, as indeed it is doing, to ensure the success and viability of families and businesses across the generations.
Thank you. Stephen, what do you think about the challenges in identifying family assets?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very crucial, very interesting topic. When we're putting into place a succession plan for a family, of course, we're dealing first with the patriarch, and I can give one terrific example that occurred within the last 2 years, where the patriarch had, together with his family, put together the list of assets that were known. I went searching, and I started with public companies in the United States only, for shareholding that he or the family might have. And believe it or not, I found shareholding in a major US company that is now a massive company. And can you believe it, the value of those shares now was slightly in excess of $100 million. And it was not on the asset list. So in discussions with the patriarch, who has since passed, may he rest in peace, many of you will know who I'm talking about, but of course we won't mention his name here. There were others that he hadn't listed, and his comment was, I bought those, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, and I think I only invested $100,000. Well, that would be right. That would make sense when instructions to reinvest were there. So this is a particularly crucial point, and a challenging point, obviously. Needs a lot of initiative to go searching, and of course in some private businesses that have been forgotten or lost may also be very valuable. They simply cannot be traced, but it's a very crucial part, and I'm sure it's extremely common, particularly obviously as the patriarchs do tend to live relatively long lives, and who knows what shares they own in private companies. So it's very much a crucial issue in part of the succession planning.
If I can highlight two things that flow from that. Stephen's spoken about the nature of the patriarch, who might be as old as 90. People like that who've built up a business for themselves often find it very reluctant to give up control. And if they would come to someone like me and say, what should I do? And I would say, well, you should think about setting up a trust. A not unreasonable question is, what's that? And if the answer is, as it is technically, well, it's very easy. You just give all of your property to somebody else and they'll look after it for you. And if you've got a problem, that you can go to court to sort it all out. That's not an attractive response. So part of what one has to do is create structures that are consistent with the values of the region and give assurance to people in that situation that there won't be a loss of control. But the other side of it is that there has to be a proper transition of control, because if the younger members of the family, and we might be talking about people who are 60 years old, have no experience in running or administering assets, and suddenly this gets dropped in their lap without notice, then that has the capacity to cause business disruption. The other thing in my experience is that patriarchs often say, there's no need for this, everything's under control, I know what's going to happen, my children all get on terribly well with one another, and that will keep happening, I'm not worried. What they tend to ignore is the fact that very often the reason why the children get on with one another is precisely because he's there or she's there. Yeah. And they know perfectly well that if they misbehave, mother or father will come after them. So the need to persuade people to think about how the business will operate without them, and more to the point, how the family will operate without them, is a crucial aspect of this advice. A friend of mine puts it that a lot of this really is part of being a conversation rather than being a lawyer. It's finding out what the human needs of the family are and how they can best be satisfied. I mean, and putting the legal structures in place is really the easy bit. I'm sure both Dr. Adele and Stephen, in their various roles, have found the most difficult thing really is to find out what the family really wants.
Yeah, well, maybe we can mention here that DIFC and ADGM have special structures that are targeting family businesses, and then we can make use of that. Adil, if I may ask you, I understand various free zones have set up a special category, which is family business license. What do you advise other family offices in the world? Do you tell them come to Dubai and set up here? Or do you provide other advice to them, particularly with all the infrastructure that we have in place?
I think this question is better answered by Stephen.
Stephen?
Do I advocate our infrastructure as to be a reliable, efficient infrastructure to support wealth preservation and management? Yes. I think the mechanics are sitting to my left.
All right, well, Stephen.
Okay, thanks, Adil. Yes, I mean, it's crucial, and look, every family is different. It's very crucial that you have and we have all the resources in place. We use David Russel KC and other associates inside the DIFC to put in place foundations, special purpose companies, trusts, whatever is necessary. And often there's an education process, obviously, to educate the patriarch and the family on what is best suits their needs. I'll lead on to the insurance issue. One of those components which is important, particularly in my view, coming from obviously a Western background, but is life insurance. And life insurance can be used to underscore and secure, the future of the family. And so I put in place a business agreement with the Bank of Singapore as one of the world's true leading banks in enabling the placement of very substantial life insurance policies. So we're talking up to and including beyond $100 million US. And in fact, the patriarch who I referred to earlier wanted to move in that direction. Unfortunately, one of his sons, and many of you again will be aware of this, was against it and didn't think it was worthwhile. As it turned out, that policy would have paid out in less than 1 year. So that's a kind of a sad outcome, but as Adil says, and David has said, all these components now are in place. We have all of them there to help the family no matter what the situation is and the individual specific structures that are needed to suit. And obviously, when the patriarch has passed, may they rest in peace, it's a sad event when the structures have not been put in place, and then inevitably and unfortunately, let's say disagreements, to be polite, occur between family members, and they can be very difficult to resolve. So it's really crucial that, as we've said, in quick summary across the whole, for a whole lot of reasons, for this country, for their family, for the emotional nature of the money that they invest, and the future and the incredible employment they provide. It's really extremely important, and in my view, as much in this country as any other country in the world.
Do you know of policies in the region that would provide key insurance policy for succession planning?
Yes, I do, and they do claim to cover it, but it's very difficult to get covered. The Bank of Singapore has put in place a entire structure, because the premiums can be quite substantial, of course, on huge levels covered. But this can be facilitated in the case where the family is prepared to invest usually a relatively small amount of their wealth, like it can be, with all due respect, like $200-300 million. They simply invest that in the Bank of Singapore, even in term deposit or whatever. They can use the income from this to fund the cost of the policy. So in reality, net, the cost is minimal, because you're paying it with the known profits of a term deposit, as an example. So the truthful answer to that, honestly, is there really are not available, except to my knowledge, through the Bank of Singapore in this part of the world, these very substantial policies. There are, of course, reinsurers involved.
Thank you. With respect to DIFC and ADGM structures, is there any structure you would advise, or is it tailor-made according to each country, according to each person?
You're quite right. To a very large extent, it is a question of what's tailor-made for the families concerned. I chaired the DIFC's Wealth Management Review. When I started off, I was inclined to think the trusts were enough, we didn't need foundations. I got persuaded to the contrary, very largely for the sort of reasons that I explained. People want to have a level of control and be assured that control won't pass from the family. But you've then got to support that with things like a family constitution. Stephen's mentioned one unfortunate case where steps that should have been taken weren't taken because of internal family disagreement. And there's a lot that can be achieved by sitting people down and saying, look, your choices are either to agree amongst yourselves about what's going to happen, or when the inevitable happens, the family business is going to end up being run by judicial commissions, which has happened in recent cases, or even worse, the family will end up having legal fights. It will probably surprise everyone here to hear me say this, but it really isn't in the interests of this economy, or indeed of families, to have their assets paid into the hands of the legal profession rather than given to the intended beneficiaries. And litigation can be extraordinarily expensive, as we all know. So getting a family constitution, a family agreement in place is critical, and then having the legal structures behind to support it. The bottom line is that the structures available across this country in the Abu Dhabi global market, the DIFC and onshore, is unmatched anywhere in the world. Our trust law has been assessed by third parties as probably the best trust law in the world. Our foundations law was reviewed by one of Europe's leading professors in the wealth management area as saying that it represented the transfer of the creativity of the original 1926 Liechtenstein legislation to the DIFC. So there's no shortage of tools available, and there's no shortage of professionals who will help people use them. It is really just a question now of people realizing that there is a problem, None of us likes to think about what's going to happen if we pass, but the bottom line is we should all expect it sooner or later, and it's going to do the least damage to ourselves and our families and our friends if it's sensibly planned for, rather than something that just happens without any consideration of what is going to happen after that.
Thank you. Adil, you are one of the supporters of digitalization and technology advancement and creative strategies. Can you please tell us what are your thoughts about it and how do you see the future going forward?
As with regards to family businesses?
Yes, of course.
So you would probably know that most family businesses have evolved from certain business concepts. A lot of them were doing the right thing at the right time in the right place. Many of these concepts, though, will not survive the future. So many of family businesses, for example, evolved due to agencies. They got agencies of certain products. The concept of agencies is being challenged tremendously. There are other concepts when it comes to like real estate. So a lot of these will be challenged also moving forward, the concept of living, the lifestyle concept. So families that have wealth, that have relied on old business concepts, need to be aware that future business concepts will most probably disrupt their industry. And for them to survive that, they need to get back to business model development, continuously develop new business models, and do that in an efficient, effective way. How to do that? There are processes now that can help in doing so. But then going back to business development mode is what you need to push those families to do.
Yeah, thank you. Well, gentlemen, I think our time is up, and before we open the stage for the audience to ask questions, I would like each one of you to give one takeaway to our audience. One word.
Do it now.
Thank you.
Back to the drawing board. Yeah. Back to the drawing board.
Since David probably stole my line, I would say start the process of documenting all the assets that you can recall.
Thank you. We're ready to take your questions if you have any.